Let me ask you something very directly. If nothing in your situation has changed for months, maybe even years, is it really because you're stuck? Or is it because you're avoiding a decision you already know you need to make? Not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because deciding feels heavier than staying silent. Most people never confront that difference honestly. And that's exactly why they stay where they are. In this series, we've been talking about decisions most people postpone. In the first video, we explored the hidden cost of not deciding, why indecision is never neutral, even when it feels harmless. In the second, we looked at a very concrete situation, asking for more versus staying quiet, and how silence quietly erodes leverage. In the third, we talked about time, why staying a bit longer is often more expensive than leaving, even when nothing dramatic happens. And in the last video, we addressed one of the biggest myths people rely on. That clarity will come if you just wait long enough. This video ties all of that together, because once you understand what's really happening underneath, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. If you're currently weighing whether to stay or leave a situation, there's a structured way to think this through calmly. That's exactly what Quit and Go was built for. Not to push you out, but to make the real cost visible. You're not stuck. You're avoiding a decision. And those two things are not the same. The word stuck is convenient. It suggests something external is blocking you. Circumstances are to blame. There's nothing you can do right now. It removes responsibility without sounding irresponsible. Avoiding a decision does the opposite. It implies agency. And agency means accountability. So people unconsciously choose the explanation that feels lighter. This is important. Avoidance is not cowardice. It's not laziness. It's not incompetence. Avoidance is usually a risk management strategy. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Minimize immediate danger, preserve stability, avoid irreversible moves. The problem is not that this mechanism exists. The problem is that it's short-term optimized. Your brain compares two things. One, a known discomfort you already understand. An unknown risk you can't fully calculate, and it almost always chooses the known discomfort. Not because it's better, but because it's predictable. This is why people stay in roles they've outgrown. In relationships they already understand are limited. In situations that slowly drain them, but don't shock them. Here's the mistake that keeps everything in place. People believe staying means nothing happens, but staying is not neutral. Staying is an active decision with delayed consequences. You're paying in time, optionality, energy, confidence, narrative control. But because the cost is spread out, it feels invisible. No invoice arrives, no alarm goes off, and that's exactly why it's dangerous. This is where a framework helps. Not motivation, not advice, just a clear comparison between staying and leaving. That's what Quit and Go gives you. Most people already know the direction of the decision. They don't need more information. They don't need another video. They don't need another conversation. What they need is permission to delay responsibility. Let's wait a bit longer sounds rational, but it's not a strategy, it's a pause button without a resume plan. If you recognize yourself here, pause for a second. Don't argue with the idea, just notice the pattern. And if you want a calm way to think through what staying and leaving actually cost, without pressure, there's a simple decision framework linked below. It's not advice, it's structure. This belief causes more paralysis than almost anything else. People assume, once I feel clear, I'll decide. But clarity doesn't precede decisions. Clarity follows them. As long as you don't decide, everything stays abstract. All options feel equally unfinished, no feedback is possible. Decision collapses abstraction into reality. That's uncomfortable, but grounding. If you were truly stuck, nothing would be possible. But if you're undecided, everything is still possible. And unlimited possibility is not empowering, it's paralyzing. Because as long as nothing is chosen, nothing can be evaluated. Avoidance gives you something valuable in the short term. That's why it works so well. It protects your current identity, quietly, efficiently, without conflict. As long as you don't decide, nothing about you has to change. Not how you introduce yourself, not how others perceive you, not how you justify your choices to yourself. You can keep multiple narratives alive at the same time. I could leave, but now isn't the right moment. I could ask, okay, but I just need a bit more clarity. I'm not staying, I'm just waiting. Those narratives are comforting. They allow you to postpone loss without admitting delay. Avoidance also shields you from social friction. The moment you decide, you invite questions. Why now? Why this? Why didn't you do it earlier? As long as you avoid deciding, no explanations are required. Silence keeps relationships stable. Indecision keeps expectations low. That's not accidental, and it's protective. There's another deeper layer. Avoidance preserves optionality. As long as nothing is chosen, no door fully closes, no version of you becomes final, no future has to be defended. Psychologically, that feels like freedom, but it's not free, because maintaining multiple possible selves at once is cognitively expensive. You're constantly switching contexts, revisiting the same internal debate, rerunning scenarios without resolution. That background load drains energy, slowly but reliably. Avoidance also delays regret. If you don't decide, you can't be wrong. If you don't choose, you can't fail. At least not explicitly. So avoidance feels safer than commitment. But that safety is borrowed, not owned. The cost just doesn't appear immediately. This is why capable, intelligent people avoid decisions for so long. Not because they're confused, not because they lack courage, but because avoidance is doing its job too well. It keeps the present intact, at the expense of the future. And here's the part most people miss. The longer avoidance protects you, the harder it becomes to give it up. Because now you're not just deciding about a situation, you're deciding about the story you've been telling yourself about why you stayed undecided for so long. That's a heavier decision than the original one ever was. Avoidance compounds. The longer you wait, the harder change feels to justify, the more invested you become, the more your past decisions start defending themselves. What started as just waiting slowly turns into self-binding. Not because you can't move, but because moving now feels heavier than before. Ask yourself this calmly. If you stay exactly where you are for another 6 months, what will it cost you? Not emotionally, not hypothetically, in real terms. What options close? What leverage erodes? What becomes harder to reverse? You don't need to answer out loud, just don't avoid the question. If you want help structuring that question, not answering it emotionally but rationally, that's exactly what the Quit and Go framework is for. It doesn't tell you what to do. It shows you what you're already paying. The link is in the description. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They hear the word decision and immediately think of action, of consequences, of irreversible steps. So they avoid deciding, not because they don't know what they want, but because they don't want to trigger movement they're not ready for. That fear is understandable, but it's based on a false equivalence. A decision is not action. A decision is positioning. When you decide, you are not committing to movement. You are committing to honesty. You are saying, I will no longer pretend that waiting is neutral. That alone changes everything. Because as long as you haven't decided, every day feels provisional, temporary, reversible, and that illusion is exhausting. Action changes reality. Decision changes how you relate to reality. You can decide to stay and still do nothing today. You can decide to leave and set no deadline. You can decide to test, to observe, to prepare. But once you decide, the situation stops floating. It gains structure. This is why people often feel calmer after deciding, even when nothing has changed externally. The noise quiets down. You stop reopening the same mental loop every morning. You stop renegotiating the same question every evening. That relief doesn't come from action. It comes from closure. Without a decision, everything feels equally unfinished. Every option stays alive. Every alternative remains hypothetical. Every doubt stays relevant. That might sound like freedom. In practice, it's paralysis. Decision collapses possibilities into priorities, and priorities can be evaluated. You can't evaluate an option you haven't chosen. You can't learn from a path you refuse to step onto, even mentally. This is why clarity follows decision, not the other way around. Another important distinction: decisions are revisable. Actions often aren't. You can decide today and revise tomorrow. You can update your position as new information appears. But as long as you refuse to decide, you're not staying flexible. You're staying uncommitted. And uncommitted time has a cost. Most people don't need courage to act. They need permission to decide without acting immediately. Once that permission exists, the pressure drops. You stop asking, "What if this is the wrong move?" and start asking, "What does this position show me?" That shift alone is progress. Decision is not about forcing change. It's about stopping self-deception. It's the moment you admit, staying is a choice. Waiting is a choice. Silence is a choice. And once choices are named, they can be weighed. That's why decision is the antidote. Not motivation, not confidence, not urgency. Decision. Because once you decide, even temporarily, you regain authorship over your time. And time, when it's owned instead of avoided, stops slipping through your hands unnoticed. Every video so far has been pointing to the same truth from a different angle. Indecision has a cost, silence has a cost, time has a cost, waiting does not produce clarity. This video explains why all of that happens, even to intelligent, capable people. Not because they don't know better, but because avoidance feels reasonable until you calculate the full price. If you're currently in a situation where a decision is being avoided rather than made, take a look at the framework below. Use it or don't. But stop telling yourself you're stuck. You're not. Some decisions don't change your position. They change your leverage. If that's the situation you're in, the second framework is linked below. In the next video, we'll talk about something even harder to admit. Why many people don't stay because it's safe, but because deciding would force them to confront who they really are. Not their job, not their situation, their identity. You're not stuck. You're standing in front of a decision that feels heavier than it actually is, because you've been carrying it silently for too long. Once it's named, it becomes lighter, not easier, but clearer.